think of when kindness glows is the one that, the line that makes me think more of Bill than anything. I've met Bill all along through the years that I've been in business. He has been a consultant as well as myself, so we met at many gatherings. Also, he brought me into the organization he was working with because some of the people weren't talking to each other, and he wanted me to see if I could get them to start talking to each other. Then Bill and I became leaders in a group called the Catholic Impact Networking Business Group. It had been around for a while, but he and I joined probably about 2018. And the people that started it started to fall away, the leaders. And so Bill and I accepted those roles as leaders, and then we went into the pandemic. So it wasn't an easy time to lead anything, but we did it on Zoom. But I just remember him as just a wonderfully kind person. And when we put a board together, one of the women wasn't very kind. She was the type that had a lot of things to say, but she never did anything. And she would really get under my skin a lot, and I would go to him, and I didn't want to tell her off, but it would really bother me. And I'd go to him, and he'd say, "Oh, well, she'll be okay. It'll be okay." Well, one day she took him on. She came after Bill, and to my amazement, he went right back at her and really told her off. And I just stood there staring at him. I couldn't believe this was Bill. But it was the right thing to do. And I think if I have anything to say about Bill, I think he always did the right thing. He always seemed to step back and to look at a situation, but not let anyone run over him either. And that gave me a lot of courage after that to deal with her. And things got so much better. And last Saturday, when he and I talked to each other, we were planning for 2026 and what lies ahead for the group. And again, he was very positive and what we needed to do. And so it's a great loss when it happens so quickly. But I think this is a good moment, Al, that you brought us, Al and John, that you brought us together so that it's not such a catastrophe, that it isn't so hard to take, that it is part of Jesus's plan. Thank you.
I never met Bill in person. I think I met him through the COVID on this Wednesdays. And I was brand new, and that's right before I moved here. And he was such a lovely man, like a big teddy bear. That I think I wondered if he was available because I'm single, right? And so I remember asking Al, I said, "Al, is he married?" And Al said, "Yep, he is." I said, "Oops." But now that I'm in Fort Myers and I've come back, I've always wondered how Bill was doing, because he's still, even though I've never met him in person, I always felt inspired by him. So may you continue to inspire us to enter each day with a generous heart, to serve the call of courage and love until we see your face again. And he was so loving, such a wonderful leader that you chose, Al, because I knew there was something going on now that I came back, but I didn't know. And today I was going to talk to him and say, "Hey, how's it going? What's going on?" And nothing. And I am so sad but I'm glad he's not in pain. And hopefully one day we'll see him again, where we will never lose each other, because there is so much love in our group. And so thank you all for doing this. And I will miss you, Bill, and I love you, and thank you for all your love and kindness that you have not only given to me, but to each and every one of us.
I had been encouraged to join this group, and I was very frightened. I don't know why, but Bill was the moderator the first time I came in. He was so kind and so generous, and telling me I was moving from Sarasota back to Glen Ellen. He's like, oh, there's wonderful restaurants in Glen Ellen. And I just thought, oh, I'm going to love this group. He's just so kind. And I was rather surprised at how upset I was when a dear friend, Rob Olendorf, told me that he had passed. I was grateful, because I thought, how can I go to chapel and keep it together, being the Irish girl that I am with my bladder too close to my eyes. But I just want to thank you, Bill. I know you're here with us today. I can feel it. You had a light and an energy that was just so amazing. And I'm so grateful. And I'm so grateful for the group and for you all, for all. And I have a deep faith that he just walked through that veil, and everybody was so happy to see him and greet him, and we will greet him again one day as well. I'm just so very grateful for the opportunity to have known him for the short time that I did. I bless him and us.
A few things come to mind when I think of Bill, and one is that he was on chapel one day and he was fully dressed, but I could tell he was in the hospital. And I said, Bill, are you in the hospital? And he said, yes, but here he was, fully dressed in his clothes, and he didn't want to bring any attention to the fact that he was in fact being hospitalized. That just made an impression on me. And also the way that the prayers just flowed from his mouth. I never knew whether he had planned the prayers that he said on chapel, whether he prepared them in advance, but they were always so tied to the theme, and it seemed like the prayers just flowed so freely from his mouth that I was so impressed by that. And then I know how happy he was when he announced that his son was moving closer so he could be closer to his, I think, grandchild. I'm not sure if it was more than one, but that was such a special moment for Bill, and I'm glad that he at least had that time with his son nearby.
I feel very jealous of all of you who knew Bill personally. I only know him from these chapels, but just like you were talking, Susan, I used to look forward to what he would pull together at the end, because they were always so, I thought, how could he just come up with these prayers? I looked forward every time I was here to how Bill would pull everything together and just kind of give it a stamp in my heart. So I'm very grateful, even though I never knew him in person.
In our last dinner with Bill, which was 3 weeks ago, first of all, we laughed a lot. It felt like Bill was coming out of this. The dinner before felt more gloomy. It felt more like reality, but I don't know, Al, I maybe remember it different, but it felt like at least 70% of that dinner we were laughing and kidding, and he would laugh about why, how his doctors would always say, you look great, because I think Al and I both said, man, you look great. And he goes, that's what my doctors tell me, I think that's hilarious. And he said, but I'll take it. And we had all kinds of laughter. But in the middle of the dinner, for some reason, we got talking about his closing prayers on the Wednesday chapel. And we said, man, when do you plan those up? I mean, they're just so well thought out and so beautiful and so thoughtful. He said, oh, I don't plan them out. He said, I just listen during the reflection, and I just listen to what people are saying, and I just kind of pull it together from what is happening in the present moment. And it just dawned on me what I had so long assumed was his just well thought out art of writing prayers was, no, it was a reflection of his being in the present moment. And that's, I think if there's anything, as I think of Bill, he's always present when he's with you, always asking questions, always interested. But he was probably the most humble, smart human being that I think I've ever met. And I know during my eye surgeries this year, he would email and insist. He said, and this was in the middle of all his chemo, and he says, I want to come over. I'll come pick you up. We'll go to breakfast. But that was just like him to just always be focused on you, never in a hurry. Just so hard to believe. This went so quickly, but it's also like Bill to be have everything planned out and buttoned down and a matter of fact, and it just feels like his departure. They always say people decide when they go, and this feels very Bill-like. I'll miss him dearly.
I remember clearly the day that Bill invited me to lunch at Cooper's Hawk, and he wanted to talk about his future with regard to ministry in the parish. And he felt like he had come to a stage in his life where he was wanting more, and he wanted to go deeper but he wasn't clear on how he wanted to be in the future. But he did say he would like something. He didn't use the word spiritual, but he talked about something that would give him life. And we left saying, I'll keep my eyes and ears open, and you keep your heart open, and together we'll find what it is that you deeply desire. And so the fact that he's been part of the chapels, and he was very much a part of our adult ed and business breakfast at the parish, he came to find what would feed him. And so I say your friendship was like the dawn brightening over our lives, awakening beneath the dark, a further adventure of color. And he found the color.
Well, I knew Bill from church. I mean, I'd seen him. We knew each other's names. We'd say hello, but I never really got to know Bill at all, personally like this. And I didn't go to the Wednesday chapels regularly either, so I never really got a sense of all his gifts that he had. But that second stanza in this beautiful poem, that his friendship was like the dawn. So I didn't really know him very well, but it was like he was in my space, just like whatever, we interbe, right? So he was part of my environment here, even though I didn't really know him, or I did not know of his gifts, but that they were there, that he was like that awakening beneath the dark and a further adventure of color, that he enriched just by his presence and his effect on others who knew him well, that it really kind of added color to my life as well.
I didn't know Bill in person either. I just knew him from his Hollywood Square here on Wednesdays. And I assumed that he was a professional speaker. He was so articulate. You know, he never stammered, never stuttered, never repeated himself. It came out in a whole beautiful piece. And so I assumed that he was a professional speaker and a professional writer. And I had always thought to myself, how nice that he's sharing this talent, that he's sharing his profession with us, because he stood out and made such an impression on me, the way he worded things, the way he pulled things together. And several times he would say something very humorous, not just to us, but to the group. And I would see a real spark of humor in him too. And I thought, I really like this guy. And he's a professional. So he's a professional saint now praying for us. And I'm so glad to have known him.
I just started reading Ron Roheiser's latest book, Insane for the Light. And this book is about giving our death away, leaving a legacy to those who are left behind. And as I listen to all of you, I think, what a legacy Bill has left behind. What a blessing Bill has left behind for all of us, those who knew him very well, and those of us who just kind of knew him from chapel. What a blessing he has given to us all, and what a model he is for each of us as we get to that point in our lives. We're getting towards the end of our lives, and I'm feeling that these days myself. But what a gift he has given us in terms of the model that he gave for how he gave his death away to us.
I too never met Bill in person. I know when I went to Chicago and I went to Chris's funeral and met John, after I met John, I'm like, oh, I wish I could meet Bill. At the end, as we were saying, at the end of the Wednesday gatherings, I too, like Sister Kathy said, I waited for his blessing.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for the precious base of these chapels. And I didn't know Bill personally, but surely felt kinship. There's so much intimacy shared in these chapels. It is such a gift. So I, always imagined Bill just being a friendly, kind, loving guy with a great personality. And so I'm grateful to have known him through the and grateful for this space where I can get to know all of them. With a deep sense of it.
Boy, I second everything that you have all so eloquently said. And one other thing that came to mind too is John O'Donohue has written a book called Anam Cara. I'm sure many of you have read it. And the thesis of it is the soul connection that you have with some people. And I never met Bill in person either. I only knew him through these chapels. But he seems like he would be the epitome of an Anam Cara friend. And most especially to you, Al, and to you, Jen, who talked about, how well you knew him. And there's no doubt that Anam Cara spirit of Bill's carried you, Al, and you, Jen, to be able to read this incredible passage from John O'Donohue. And I would imagine that Bill is probably saying to you, boys, and everybody else here in this chapel, may you continue to inspire us to enter each day with a generous heart and to serve your call of courage and love, which is what you do in these chapels every single day. Thank you.
I didn't know Bill personally since I live so far away, but the scripture that comes to mind to me about Bill is that he's finished the race. He's fought the good fight. He's crossed the finish line. And now he's in God's cheering squad for us. And I find that a very comforting thought, because I think if Bill was anything, he was a cheerleader on behalf of others. And I picture him doing that now.
John and I started these dinner tradition with Bill right after he was in remission. I don't know, must have been 2.5 years ago. And we would go out to dinner, and my custom is, I sit down, I look at the menu, I like to order. But Bill, it's like at least 45 minutes before he even opens up the menu. And that used to drive me crazy. And I would just, sit there trying to be patient and engaging in the conversation. And as I reflect back on that, it just is a great example, I think, of how relational Bill is. Like, we would sit down, and like the first thing we would do is like this round robin of like catching up, like, how's it going? I want to hear about the kids. What's going on in your work? Like, the meal or the food was sort of secondary to being present to one another. And he was just this consummate networker too, where almost every day he would have a breakfast with somebody, a lunch with someone else. And it just, in reflecting this afternoon, it just really occurs to me just how deeply relational a man Bill was, and how his relationships informed so much of who he is, who he was, what he did. And I imagine that is why he was able to let so much of his own pain and suffering not get the better of him, because he identified more with his relationships than he did with sort of that separate self. And man, that is just an example that I want to aspire to.
I think one thing too, Al, that I would add is one thing I've loved about this time together is just thinking about how much Bill would have hated this. He would have hated the attention that he's so well deserved. That's just who he was.
I'm going to jump in for a minute. This is Patty. I am good friends with Bill's wife, as well as good friends with his son, Colin. And first thing Cindy told me, and I just walked right over to her house. They lived down the street, and I held them both, and I just kept saying to Colin how lucky you were. Like, you had the greatest guy for a dad. What a great example he was in all of his ways. And I've always kind of thought that, in my mind, just the way Bill, the expression on his face whenever we were with him, he just always looked like he had a secret, like he knew something the rest of us didn't. He was so calm. He was so gentle. He had a plan. He didn't seem to worry. He was so present. And, nobody's perfect, but I just felt like he had a secret. And his wife, Cindy, was just beside herself all the time that he wasn't, eating better and while he was sick, and that he shouldn't be having sugar, and that he should be eating these kale smoothies, and he should be, all the things, because she wanted to be a help. And I think I know what the secret might have been, everyone, if you want to know. He had a secret drawer in his study where he hid all of his candy bars and his Twinkies and all the stuff that he tried to keep from Cindy. It was like the joy wasn't going to go. He was on this path, and he was going to enjoy every day, and he was going to be so present and all the things. And I'm kidding about that being his secret, but he did have a secret drawer. And it would infuriate Cindy when she would find out that he, eating all these little candy bars or whatever. But I just wanted to share that with you, because that's my sense of Bill. And gosh, I hope someday to learn the secret and live the way that he showed us.
I only met Bill once, and that was at a silent retreat. And you can't get much conversation going at a silent retreat. So I never had the opportunity to really talk to him. I knew him from the chapels, and as everybody says, the prayers he said at the end were absolutely amazing. I thought he must have spent hours writing those. There was a phrase this morning that somebody used in chapel that I was at. And 3 little words: grace slips in. And sometimes it slips in the form of a person. And I think Bill was that person. That Bill was the grace that slips into people's hearts, unawares, but yet brings them peace and comfort. The grace that is the grace that opens your heart.
Is there anything else anyone wishes to offer before we close?
Well, I did not know Bill either, other than when I would see him on the Wednesday chapel. But I am so filled with joy to hear all of you describe your relationships with him and the incredible gifts that he brought forth. I feel like I know him now better than just seeing him on the chapel. So thank you to all of you, and may we all be like Bill.
Can I say one thing? I mean, chapel was just a small iceberg, the tip of the iceberg of everything that Bill did. And I love what everyone said, and it's all true.
Anyone else?